Here's the problem. I thought everything was fine with me. 20 years with the same woman, a house, decent job, everything was fine. But lately, it's like I've been living with a stranger who put a knife to my back. And I didn't even notice it happening. Lisa and I have been married since we were dumb kids, just out of high school. Back then it was all fire and big dreams, road trips, late nights, work. But somewhere along the line, that spark went out. Probably, life got in the way. The children grew up, then went to college. Bills were piling up. I worked in a warehouse, pulling overtime to keep us afloat while she took care of the house. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. At least I thought it was. I'm a simple guy. Give me a cold beer, a baseball game on TV, and the safety of my family, and I'm fine. Honor is important to me. Loyalty. Keeping what is mine, mine. That's how I was raised, and I thought Lisa got it from me. But the last few months? God, something changed. She started to pull away, and I don't just mean the quiet evenings when we sat on opposite ends of the couch. It was something more. She was looking at me across the kitchen table as if I were some old piece of furniture that she was tired of dusting. At first, I brushed her off. People can be moody, right? I wasn't going to whine about it. I'm not like that. But then she started saying stuff, little jabs that hurt more each time. "You're so boring, Tom," she'd say, tossing her hair back like she was auditioning for some movie I wasn't in. "Where's the guy I married? The one who's used to taking risks, living a little." I just grumbled and kept eating my eggs, thinking she would get over it. But she continued. "You're stuck in the past," she snapped. "A snob who doesn't know how to enjoy life." A snob? Me? I'm a guy who wears the same 5 flannel shirts and thinks that evening is burgers at a diner. But this word struck me. It was not just an insult. It was as if she was rewriting who I was in her head. The complaints piled up. She continued to say that there was no more passion between us, that I did not sweep her off her feet like some knight in a fairy tale. I wanted to scream. "What do you want me to do? Lisa, do you want me to quit my job and take you dancing every night? We have a mortgage." But I didn't. I kept quiet, thinking that maybe she was just restless. 2 decades together can take its toll on anyone. I decided that I would wait it out, let her talk it out. That's what men do. Hold the line, keep things stable. Then she started to disappear. Not for long, an hour here, 2 there. "I'm going to the store," she'd say, but she'd come back with nothing. "Duma, I'm meeting Jenny for coffee," even though Jenny is the one who texted me asking where Lisa was. Of course, I noticed, but I didn't insist. I trusted her. That's what you do when you've built a life with someone you trust them. Maybe I was an idiot. However, one night it became clear that something was wrong. I came home from a double shift, tired to the point of breaking down, ready to snap. She wasn't there. No note, no text message. Just an empty house. The TV's still on, as if she had left in a hurry. I called her, and it went straight to voicemail. My gut twisted. "Don't worry, not yet. Just this heavy, sour feeling I couldn't shake." She arrived around midnight, her hair disheveled, her eyes darting around as if she had seen a ghost. "Where have you been?" I asked, standing in the kitchen, arms crossed. She waved me off. "With friends." I lost track of time. Her voice was sharp, as if she was challenging me to an argument. I didn't argue. Not at the time. But after that, I watched her more closely. The way she clutched her phone, holding it at an angle so I couldn't see the screen. The way she snapped at me for the smallest things, like when I asked if she wanted to watch a movie and she called me pathetic for wanting to stay home. Pathetic? That's a bit much. I'm not the type to be easily influenced, but I'm also not the type to start a fight over words. I let it simmer, thinking she would come back. And then came Friday, which turned everything upside down. I left work early. The boss sent us home after a delivery was delayed. I pulled into the driveway, and there was her car, right where it should be. Good, I thought. Maybe we could talk, sort out this mess. I went in, kicked off my shoes, and called her name. Nothing. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then I heard it. Laughter, low and fast, coming from upstairs. Not just hers. A man's voice, deep, unfamiliar. My blood grew hot. I wasn't thinking. I didn't wait. I grabbed my phone out of my pocket and started to climb the stairs, each step harder than the last. My chest was pounding, not with fear, but with rage. 20 years, and this is all I got? I wasn't going to sit around and wonder. I was going to see it with my own eyes, and I was going to be damn sure I had proof. I hit the top of the stairs, and that laugh curse, mixed with his, lit a fire in me I couldn't put out. My hand was shaking, not from nerves, but from this pure, red-hot anger boiling up. 20 years of busting my hump for her, for us, and now this? I wasn't sneaking around like some coward. I stormed down the hall, phone up, recording video. If she was throwing it all away, I'd have it on tape, something solid to shove in her face later. The bedroom door was cracked open. I kicked it wide, and there they were. Lisa, half-dressed, tangled up in our bed with some guy I didn't recognize at first. She yelped, scrambling to pull the sheet over herself, her face going white. Them? He just froze, staring at me like a deer in headlights. I didn't say a word, just kept the camera rolling, letting it catch every second of their guilt. Tom, what the hell? She shouted, voice high and panicked. I didn't answer. I was too busy burning the scene into my skull. Then it hit me. Then face. I knew him. Not from around town. Not some random jerk. It was Rick, her ex-husband. The guy she'd spent years trashing to anyone who'd listen. He's a snake, she'd said 100 times. A selfish creep who never cared about anybody but himself. She'd told me stories, how he'd cheated on her, left her broke, humiliated her in front of her family. I listened, nodded, even felt bad for her back then. Now here he was, in my house, in my bed, with my wife. The same woman who'd sworn she hated his guts. I lowered the phone, but I didn't turn it off. Rick, I said, my voice low, rough. You screwing Rick? She didn't answer, just yanked the sheet tighter, her eyes darting between me and him. He smirked, the smug bastard, like he'd won something. That's when I lost it. I lunged, grabbed his shirt off the floor, and threw it at him. Get out, I roared. Now. He stumbled up, muttering something I didn't catch, and bolted past me, half naked down the stairs. I heard the front doors slam a minute later. Lisa just sat there, staring at me, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the words. Tom, as she started, but I cut her off. Don't even try. I held up the phone, the red dot still blinking. I've got it all right here. You and your scumbag ex. After everything you said about him. She flinched, and I saw it, guilt. Sure, but something else. Defiance. Like she wasn't even sorry, just mad she got caught. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. Downstairs, I paced the living room, replaying it in my head. Wreck. Of all people. She hadn't just cheated, she'd gone back to the one guy she'd swore up and down was poison. All those nights she'd ranted about him, tears in her eyes, telling me how I was different, how I was better. Lies. Every word of it. It wasn't just the betrayal that gutted me, it was the hypocrisy. She'd played me for a fool, and I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV, the phone still in my hand. My chest felt tight, like someone had parked a truck on it. I wanted to smash something, anything, but I just sat there, butting the anger stew. She came downstairs a while later, dressed now, hair pulled back. We need to talk, she said, her voice shaky but firm, like she had any right to call the shots. Talk? I barked a laugh, standing up fast. You don't get to talk. You've been lying to my face for God knows how long. About him. About us. What else? Lisa? What else you hiding? She crossed her arms, looking away. It's not what you think, she said, quieter now. Rick and I. It just happened. Just happened. I stepped closer, towering over her. You don't accidentally climb into bed with the guy you swore you despised. You don't accidentally trash me for months, calling me dull, boring, while you're running back to that piece of garbage. My voice was loud, shaking the walls. I didn't care. Let the neighbors hear. Let the whole damn town know. She didn't back down, though. You don't get it, Tom. You never did. I needed something more, something you stopped giving me years ago. That hit like a punch. I stopped giving her? I'd given her everything, my time, my sweat, my loyalty. And she threw it back in my face for a guy she'd once called a monster. I held up the phone again. This says different. This says you're a liar. Not just to me, to yourself. She glared at me, her eyes hard, and for the first time in 20 years, I didn't recognize her. The woman I'd married was gone, replaced by this stranger who'd gutted me twice over, once with the act, and again with who she'd picked. I turned away, heading for the door. I'm not staying here tonight, I said, grabbing my keys. You figure out what you're gonna say when I'm back. Cause the scene over. I walked down into the night, the cold air hitting me like a slap. My head was spinning, but one thing was clear. She'd crossed a line I couldn't unsee. And Rick? That smug face was burned into me now. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about him, Till. I couldn't sleep that night. Ended up crashing in my truck, parked at some empty lot by the river, the phone with that video burning a hole in my pocket. The more I thought about it, the madder I got. Lisa and Rick. Perex. The guy she'd painted as the devil himself, all while sneaking around with him behind my back. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the way they'd played me, like I was some chump too dumb to see the game. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't gonna sit around waiting for her to spin more lies. I was going straight to the source. I tracked Rick down easy enough. I still hung out at the same dive bar he always had, a rundown joint on the edge of town. I walked in around noon, spotted him at the counter nursing a beer, that same smug look plastered on his face. My fist clenched the second I saw him, but I kept my cool. Barely. I had a plan. Slapping him around might feel good, but it'd screw me later. Court don't care about feelings, it cares about evidence. I slid my phone into my shirt pocket, hit record, and walked over. Britt, I said, voice flat, stopping a few feet from him. He turned, slow, like he'd been expecting me. Tom, he drawled, leaning back on the stool. Figured you'd show up eventually. That tone, cocky, like he'd already won, made my blood boil. I wanted to grab him by the throat and slam him into the bar, watch that grin split open. But I didn't. I stood there, arms crossed, letting the phone catch every word. Then a while, huh? I said, stepping closer. Last I heard, you were the worst thing that ever happened to Lisa. Least, that's what she told me. Guess that was all bull. He chuckled, taking a swig of his beer. Oh, she said a lot of things. Keeps you off the scent, don't it? My jaw tightened. Off a scent? What's that supposed to mean? I asked, keeping my voice steady, even though I could feel the rage clawing up my chest. He shrugged, casual as you please. She's been with me for years, man. On and off since you two got hitched. Worked out a system. Her whining about me kept you from sniffing around. Smart, right? Years. The word hit me like a sledgehammer. Not months, not a fling, years. My hands twitched, but I didn't move. That little red dot on my phone was my lifeline now. Years, I repeated, loud enough for the mic to pick up. So all that crap she fed me, how you ruined your life, how she hated you, that was just a cover? He nodded, smirking like he was proud of it. Pretty much. She'd come running to me every time you got too boring for her. Said you were a good guy, just stale. Needed me to spice things up. Stale. There it was again, the word she'd thrown at me lately. Only now I knew it wasn't some midlife crisis. It was her excuse to crawl back to this slime. I stepped closer, towering over him. You're a real piece of work, you know that? Sneaking around with my wife, laughing about it like I'm some joke. My voice was shaking now, loud, raw. He didn't flinch, just tilted his head, sizing me up. Hey, she came to me, Tom. I didn't twist her arm. Maybe if you'd kept her happy, she wouldn't have. That was it. I saw red. My fist balled up, and I was this close to swinging. Court would have failed. I could feel the weight of it, how good it'd feel to wipe that smirk off his face. But I caught myself, breathed hard through my nose, stepped back. You're lucky I don't break your jaw right here, I growled. But I'm not that stupid. He raised an eyebrow, like he didn't believe me, but I was already done. I had what I needed, his voice, clear as day, admitting it all. Years of whys, their little scheme, right there on tape. I turned, walked out without another word. My hands were shaking as I climbed into my truck, but I didn't snap. Didn't ram my fist into the dashboard or peel out like some hothead. I sat there, replaying his words in my head, letting the anger settle into something colder, harder. Evidence. That's what mattered now. The video from last night, this recording, I had enough to bury them both. Lisa thought she could play me, and Rick thought he could gloat about it. They'd see how wrong they were soon enough. I started the engine, pulled out of the lot. My marriage was dead, sure, but I wasn't going down without a fight. They built their house of cards, and I was about to kick the whole thing over. Let them try to talk their way out of this in front of a judge. I wasn't just mad anymore. I was ready. I drove straight from that bar to my buddy Mike's place. He's a no-nonsense guy, been through a messy divorce himself, and I needed someone to keep me grounded. My head was a war zone, rage, hurt, and this cold, sharp focus all slugging it out. I pulled into his driveway, killed the engine, and sat there a minute, gripping the wheel. The phone in my pocket felt like a loaded gun. 2 recordings now, Lisa and Rick in my bed, and that smug jerk spilling their whole rotten plan. It was more than enough, but I wasn't sure what came next. I just knew I wasn't letting her twist this around on me. Mike opened the door before I even knocked, beer in hand. Eyebrows up. "You look like hell, Tom. What's going on?" I didn't waste time. Walked in, dropped onto his couch, and laid it out. Everything. The distance, her jabs about me being boring, catching her with Rick, and his little confession at the bar. I played him the audio, watched his jaw tighten as Rick's voice filled the room. "Years, man. She'd come running to me every time you got too boring for her." Mike shook his head, slow, like he couldn't believe it either. "Bet's low," he said. "Even for her." "She's been lying the whole time," I said, voice rough. "Not just cheating, planning it, covering it with him." Made me think I was the problem. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring at the floor. 20 years, Mike. I gave her everything I had, and she's been laughing about it with that creep. He handed me a beer, didn't say much, just let me vent. That's what I needed. No pep talks, no pity. Just a guy who got it. We sat there a while, hashing it out. "You got a lawyer up," he said finally. "Those recordings? Gold. She won't have a leg to stand on." I nodded. I'd already been thinking the same. This wasn't about fixing things. There was no fixing this. It was about making sure she didn't walk away clean, didn't get to spin some sob story and leave me with nothing. Rick, till. If I could drag him into this mess, I would. Let him smirk his way through a courtroom. I left Mike's around dusk, headed back to the house. Not to stay, just to grab some stuff. I wasn't sleeping under that roof with her, not after what I'd seen. When I walked in, Lisa was there, sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded like she'd been waiting. She looked up, eyes red, but I didn't buy it. Crocodile tears don't work when you've been caught red-handed. "Tom," she started, voice soft, "we need to save it." I cut her off, heading for the stairs. "I'm not here to talk." She stood, following me. "You can't just walk away like this. We've got a life together." I stopped, turned, and stared her down. "Elise? You torched that the second you climbed into bed with Rick. Don't act like this is on me." Her face hardened, the mask slipping. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said. "It wasn't what it looked like." I barked alas, loud and bitter. "Not what it looked like. I've got video. Lisa. You and him, right there in our bed. And don't even try denying the rest. I talked to Rick today. He told me everything. How you've been at it for years, how you played me with all that whining about what a dirtbag he was." Her eyes widened, just for a second, before she caught herself. "You're crazy," she snapped. "He's lying." "Yeah? Well, I've got his voice on tape saying otherwise." I patted my pocket, watched her flinch. That shut her up fast. She stood there, mouth tight, like she was scrambling for a comeback but couldn't find one. I didn't wait around. Grabbed a duffel from the closet, threw in some clothes, my work boots, whatever I could carry. She trailed me, voice rising. So that's it. You're just leaving? After everything we've been through? I zipped the bag, slung it over my shoulder, and faced her. Everything we've been through? You mean everything I put up with while you were sneaking around with that scumbag? Yeah, I'm done. You made your choice. Live with it. I brushed past her, headed for the door. She yelled something. I didn't catch it, didn't care. I was out, truck roaring to life, peeling down the street. That night, I crashed at a cheap motel off the highway. Lay there on a lumpy mattress, staring at the ceiling, the recording still looping in my head. I wasn't sad anymore, just furious, ready to fight. Next morning, I called a lawyer Mike recommended. Guy named Dan, gruff voice, straight shooter. Met him at his office, played him the videos, the audio. He leaned back in his chair, nodding. This is solid, Tom. Adultery's a factor here, could swing things your way on the house, the assets. She's got no ground to stand on. Good, I said, leaning forward. I want her to feel this. Her and Rick Bose. Dan smirked, jotting notes. We'll make it hurt. File tomorrow, get the ball rolling. You got a place to stay? I shrugged. Motel for now. I'll figure it out. He nodded, like that was good enough, and sent me off with a handshake. Driving away, I felt something shift. Not release, not yet. A purpose. Lisa thought she could blindside me, rewrite our whole life with her lies. Rick thought he could gloat and get away with it. They were wrong. I had the proofs, the will, and now the law on my side. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next few weeks were a blur, but every step felt like I was taking back what was mine. Then filed the divorce papers fast, kidding Lisa with everything we had. Adultery, emotional distress, the works. I wasn't playing nice. Why should I? She'd spent years spitting on our marriage, and I had the recordings to prove it. That video of her and Rick in our bed, his voice bragging about their scheme, it was all there, locked and loaded. I wanted her to squirm, to see that smug little world she'd built come crashing down. She didn't take it quiet. First came the calls, dozens of them, voicemail after voicemail. Tom, you're ruining us. She'd cry, voice all shaky like she was the victim. We can still fix this. Fix it? I deleted everyone without replying. Then she showed up at the motel, banging on the door one night, yelling about how I was throwing away her life. I opened it, stared her down, and said, "You threw it away. I'm just cleaning up the mess." She stormed off, cursing me out, but I saw the panic in her eyes. She knew I wasn't bluffing. Court day rolled around quick. I walked in, Dan at my side, feeling this hard, steady burn in my chest. Not nerves, anger, sharpened into something I could use. Lisa was there, dressed up like she was going to a funeral, her lawyer next to her looking nervous. Rick wasn't in the room, but his name hung heavy. Dan laid it out, played the recordings, showed the judge the video stills. I sat there, arms crossed, watching her face as it all came out. She kept her head down, but I could tell she was rattled. Her lawyer tried to spin it, said the recordings were out of context, that I'd invaded her privacy. Dan shut that down fast. He caught them in his own home, he said, voice like steel. No expectation of privacy when you're cheating on your husband's dime. The judge didn't waste time. Ruled in my favor on the big stuff, the house, half the savings, no alimony. Lisa's face crumpled when he read the decision, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not one bit. She'd made her bed with Rick. Let him pick up the pieces now. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I'd felt in months, like I'd finally cut the dead weight loose. Dan clapped me on the shoulder. You did good, Tom. She's got nothing left to throw at you. Word got around fast. Mike called me that night, laughing. Heard Rick dumped her already. Guess he didn't like the spotlight. I snorted, cracking a beer. Figures. 'Cause a rat runs when the heat's on. It didn't surprise me. Rick was all talk, no spine. Lisa probably thought he'd stick by her, but he bailed the second it got real. Left her high and dry, just like she'd left me. I moved back into the house a week later. Felt weird at first, walking through those rooms, knowing what had happened there. But it was mine, earned with my sweat, my years. I wasn't letting her take that too. Started tearing stuff down, her old curtains, the pictures on the walls. Not out of spite, just 'cause it was time. A buddy from work helped me haul the bed out to the curb, replace it with a new one. Slept like a rock that night, no ghost hanging over me. Lisa tried one last time. Showed up on the porch a month later, looking rough, hair messy, eyes sunken. Tom, she said, voice small, I messed up. I know that. Can we just talk? I leaned against the door frame, staring at her. The woman I loved once was gone, replaced by this shell I didn't owe a damn thing to. Talk's over, I said. You picked your side. He'll cry to Rick, but wait, he's done with you, too. Her mouth tightened, and she turned away, shuffling off without another word. I shut the door, locked it, and that was that. Now it's just me. House is quieter, sure, but it's mine. I've got my job, my truck, a few good guys to grab a beer with. Some nights, I sit out back, watching the stars, and the anger's still there, simmering low. But it's not running me anymore. I took what was mine, stood my ground, and came out the other side. Lisa and Rick? They've got each other's wreckage to deal with. Me? I'm done carrying their mess. Life's simpler now. Harder in some ways, but cleaner. I don't trust easy anymore, and maybe that's a good thing. Keeps me sharp. Keeps me moving. And if there's one thing I know, it's this. I'm not the guy who loses what's his, not without a fight. They learned it the hard way.